The night is quiet, but it hums with a secret rhythm, a pulse that most refuse to hear. It whispers of desire, of yearning, of a hunger that has no name but leaves its mark on every heartbeat. We walk through the world thinking we understand the nature of attraction, thinking that love is simple, that longing is pure, that connection is natural, and yet, beneath the surface of smiles and small gestures, there lies a shadow, a dark undertow, that pulls the unsuspecting, the hopeful, the unaware, into patterns older than time itself. This is the shadow of female longing. This is the force that binds the heart to the unattainable, that enslaves desire to illusion, that chains curiosity to obsession. To understand this, we must first understand the architecture of the human mind, for it is here, in the folds of thought and feeling, that addiction is born. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes, of the anima and animus, of the primal energies that govern not only how we see the world, but how we are seen. Within every woman, there is an inner landscape, a terrain of myth and memory, shaped by evolution, culture, and personal experience. And within this terrain lies the seed of longing, a seed that, when nurtured by fantasy, expectation, or manipulation, grows into a force that will not be denied. It begins subtly, a glance that lingers too long, a compliment that pierces the ordinary and strikes a chord of validation, a presence that suggests danger and excitement at once. These are the sparks, the small electric charges that ignite a hunger which, if unrecognized, becomes an obsession. It is not weakness. It is the raw wiring of the psyche, ancient as the first fires of human connection. Jung would have called it an encounter with the shadow, the part of the self projected outward, and yet mirrored back through the gaze of another. And here lies the truth. Longing is not a choice. Addiction to men, whether conscious or unconscious, is not about moral failing. It is about resonance. It is about the way a certain energy vibrates against the strings of the inner self. Women are drawn to what awakens them, what challenges them, what teases the edges of their imagination and fear simultaneously. It is a magnetic pull, and like any magnetic force, it does not ask permission. It demands attention. But the world tells a different story. Society insists that this longing is sweet, that obsession is romantic, that dependence is proof of depth and sensitivity. Literature, cinema, and music glorify it. The tragic heroine who sacrifices all for love, the femme fatale who ensnares and conquers, the girl who waits for him to notice these narratives, weave themselves into the psyche, constructing a framework in which longing is celebrated, even necessary. The danger comes when admiration and desire merge into compulsion, when the psyche loses its grounding and begins to orbit around another human being, seeing them not as a partner, but as the axis of existence. It is here that addiction takes root, not through drugs or ritual, but through repeated emotional highs and lows, through moments of connection followed by absence, through the intoxicating uncertainty of affection earned and affection withdrawn. Dopamine, oxytocin, the neural chemistry of attachment science would explain it as a chemical chain reaction, but philosophy, history, and psychology recognize it as a mirror to the soul's thirst. Every moment of longing, every glance at a phone, every replay of a memory in the quiet of the night reinforces a cycle that becomes harder to break with each repetition. This is why women fall into patterns they themselves do not understand. They chase the dangerous, the unavailable, the inconsistent, not out of malice, but because these forces awaken something within that the comfortable, the steady, and the predictable cannot. Nietzsche once spoke of the necessity of struggle, of the tension between desire and discipline, of the fire that forges the soul. It is in this tension that longing becomes addictive. It is the fire, and the man, the unattainable, the complicated, the elusive, is the coal that keeps it burning. And yet understanding this is the first step to freedom. Recognizing the shadow of desire is not an accusation, it is empowerment. It is seeing the forces that move you, naming them, and reclaiming your sovereignty. Addiction to men, to longing, to obsession, thrives in ignorance, in the unconscious repetition of inherited patterns. Awareness is the blade that severs the chains. Clarity is the torch that illuminates the labyrinth. The woman who understands her shadow, the anima unbound, is the woman who stops wandering in circles, who sees the game for what it is, and who finally becomes the center of her own universe. To break the pattern, one must confront the myths that fuel it, the myth of romantic fulfillment, the myth of the good man who will fix all wounds, the myth that desire itself validates existence. These myths are seductive because they carry fragments of truth. They appeal to the soul's longing for completeness, but they are incomplete stories. They demand surrender, yet offer no stability. To reject them is not cynicism, it is mastery. It is choosing presence over projection, self over shadow, reality over fantasy. The path is neither easy nor instantaneous. The mind resists change, for it is accustomed to the rhythm of longing. The body too remembers the thrill, the rush, the ache of anticipation. And so the work must be deliberate. Meditation, reflection, discipline, honest confrontation with the self. Journals become mirrors, solitude becomes sanctuary, and boundaries become shields. One learns to observe desire without being consumed by it, to feel passion without yielding to compulsion, to engage with the world without surrendering the throne of selfhood. There is power in this liberation. It is not the dramatic triumph of a storybook heroine. It is quieter, more terrifying, more real. It is the realization that no external presence can define your value. No gaze can validate your existence. No longing can control your destiny. You become a force in your own right, magnetic not because of scarcity, but because of alignment with your own truth, your own rhythm, your own sovereignty. And then, paradoxically, the shadow loses its grip. The allure of the addictive patterns fades, not because desire ceases, but because it no longer dictates the terms. Attraction becomes an exchange, not a chain. Passion becomes a reflection, not a fixation. Connection becomes a choice, not a compulsion. Women who have walked this path emerge not as cynics, but as architects of their own lives, as sovereign beings who wield longing as an instrument, not a prison. The world outside will continue to tempt, to distract, to seduce. Men will play their roles, society will sing its songs, stories will repeat themselves. But the woman who understands the dark side of her own longing knows she is no longer captive. She moves through life with intention, with clarity, with the weightless grace of one who has touched her own depths and returned unscathed. She is a master of desire, not its victim, a navigator of passion, not its prey, a witness to her own soul, not a spectator to another's illusions. And in this mastery lies true freedom, the kind that cannot be sold, borrowed, or stolen. The chains of addiction, once invisible, are broken. The shadow, once unknowable, is illuminated. The longing, once endless, becomes a river flowing where it must, without dam or diversion, carrying the woman not toward obsession but toward herself. Here, in the quiet aftermath, she stands fully seen, fully sovereign, fully alive. The dark side of female longing has revealed its lessons, and she has claimed them. She is complete. She is free. And in that freedom, every choice, every heartbeat, every encounter becomes a dance of her own, making a testament to the power of understanding, the strength of awareness, and the unshakable gravity of a soul unbound. The wind shifts, carrying with it the scent of possibility, of roads untraveled, of nights unspent in the shadow of another's gaze. There is a rhythm here, a cadence that echoes the ancient truth. Freedom is forged in fire, not in comfort. Women who have walked through the darkness of longing understand this instinctively. They know that to step into desire without surrender is to wield a kind of power that even history's great conquerors could only envy. And yet power without wisdom is hollow. So the journey continues not away from desire, but deeper into the architecture of self, into the chambers where longing first awakened, into the crucible where fear and hope intertwine. Each encounter with another human being becomes a mirror, a reflection not of inadequacy, but of potential. Every flirtation, every whisper, every fleeting moment of attention is examined, understood, and returned with clarity. The addictive patterns of the past no longer dictate behavior. They inform it. The woman who understands the dark side of her own longing does not need the constant validation of others, for she is already validated by the recognition of her own depth. This is the alchemy of consciousness, turning desire into insight, passion into discipline, longing into sovereignty. And yet, the world is relentless. It offers the same temptations in endless repetition, hoping the lesson will be forgotten. A glance from a stranger, a fleeting text, a promise unkept, all of these are tests of awareness, invitations to either repeat the old patterns or to rise above them. The difference now is profound. The shadows no longer scare her, because she knows them. She knows the ways that desire can deceive, the illusions it can spin, the subtle traps that make the soul forget itself. Each test becomes a confirmation of mastery, a ritual of self-possession. Gratitude becomes the currency of this new existence, not the superficial gratitude taught by social convention, but a deep, visceral recognition of the forces that shaped her, of the patterns she has dismantled, of the wisdom she now carries. She thanks the addictive longing for showing her the edges of her own mind, the men who stirred her passions for giving her glimpses of her own shadows, and the nights of solitude for revealing the strength of her own heart. Gratitude is not passive here. It is an active force, a magnet that draws clarity and balance into every corner of life. Adaptability, too, becomes second nature. The woman who has mastered the dark side of longing knows that life is in constant flux, that attachment to a single outcome is a trap, that the future cannot be bargained with. She moves through change with grace, adjusting her course without losing her center, engaging with new possibilities without sacrificing sovereignty, embracing the uncertainty of existence without succumbing to fear. Resilience is not just endurance. It is the art of flowing with the currents without being swept away. And then comes the lesson that transcends desire itself. Learning, every encounter, every pattern, every heartbreak, every fleeting triumph becomes data for the mind and nourishment for the soul. She studies her reactions, her thoughts, her impulses, and in doing so, she transforms longing from a blind force into a teacher. The addictive pull that once seemed like chains now serves as a compass, pointing toward areas of growth, toward truths she might never have discovered in comfort or passivity. Knowledge becomes liberation, insight becomes power, and awareness becomes love, the love she directs first at herself, and from that abundance radiates outward. Vision emerges naturally from this mastery. A life once dictated by the tides of external attention is now guided by internal alignment. Goals, dreams, and purpose crystallize because they are no longer shadows cast by another's desires. They are reflections of a fully realized self. In this clarity, the elusive, intoxicating figure that once held the mind captive loses its dominance. Attraction still exists, yes, but it is no longer addictive. It is respectful, conscious, reciprocal. It does not demand surrender. It enhances autonomy. The woman becomes the axis around which her own life rotates, drawing toward her experiences, her people, her joy, not her obsession. And here, in this space of complete sovereignty, the ultimate truth becomes undeniable. The power to be free was never in the other, never in the chase, never in the longing itself. It was always in her. It was always in the capacity to see the patterns, to confront the shadow, to reclaim the self. The addictive longing that once threatened to undo her now stands as a monument to her awakening, a testament not to weakness, but to the depth and resilience of the human spirit. She walks forward unafraid, unchained, fully aware that the world will continue to tempt, deceive, and seduce. And yet, no force outside herself can alter the core of who she has become. She has met her darkness, embraced it, learned from it, and now moves in the world with the serene power of one who knows. Desire is not destiny, passion is not possession, and longing is not slavery. It is simply life, alive and vibrant, to be understood, navigated, and mastered. The wind carries her forward, and for the first time she walks not in pursuit of another, but in pursuit of herself. Every heartbeat, every breath, every glance is a declaration of sovereignty. Every choice affirms autonomy. Every moment is a mirror of the strength that comes from awareness. This is the culmination of the journey. The dark side of female longing has been faced, felt, and transformed. It no longer dominates, it no longer distracts, it no longer binds. And in this liberation lies the quiet, unstoppable power of true mastery. Here desire is free, passion is potent, and love, when it comes, is pure, reciprocal, and aligned. She has learned what many never do, that the shadow is not to be feared, that longing is not to be denied, that addiction is not a flaw, but a signal. And from that understanding flows a life of clarity, purpose, and infinite possibility. She is sovereign, she is awake, she is whole. And as she moves through the world with this newfound sovereignty, the lessons of the past do not vanish, they illuminate. Every glance that once threatened to ensnare her attention now serves as a reminder of her discipline. Every flirtation, every seductive whisper, every passing intrigue is filtered through the lens of awareness, recognized, acknowledged, and returned with discernment. She is no longer a participant in unconscious cycles. She is the architect of her own life, constructing each interaction with intention, each decision with clarity, and each desire with a conscious heart. This is not arrogance, nor is it detachment. It is a presence so profound that it radiates without effort, a magnetism that commands respect because it is rooted not in ego, but in self-possession. Historical figures understood this, though perhaps in fragments. The strategy of Machiavelli, the introspection of Nietzsche, the foresight of Huxley all whispered the same truth across the corridors of time. Power without self-awareness is fleeting. Awareness without courage is useless. And the mastery of the inner world is the only shield against the chaos of the outer one. She embodies all three, yet mastery is not static. There is an art to sustaining this state, a constant vigilance that does not oppress, but sharpens. She examines herself in the mirror of relationships not to judge, but to understand. She studies the ways desire manifests, the triggers that stir old patterns, the subtle seductions that attempt to breach her boundaries. And in this study, she transforms impulses into insight, reactions into choices, and vulnerability into strength. Every moment becomes a lesson, every interaction a laboratory for the self. The addictive longing that once consumed her now serves a higher purpose. It is a teacher that whispers the truth of what she values, what she fears, what she craves beyond the superficial. It is a map of her psyche, revealing hidden terrains of shadow and light. And in traversing these landscapes, she gains the most profound of powers, the ability to navigate the complexity of human connection without losing the center of her being. To love deeply, she must first be whole. To desire fully, she must first be sovereign. To engage with the world, she must first be anchored in herself. Discipline too emerges as a force more compelling than any fleeting attraction. The routines she cultivates, the boundaries she enforces, the habits she honors, these are the armor of a life unshakable. Whereas once she may have surrendered to the intoxication of external approval, she now surrenders only to principles, to purpose, to the inner compass that has replaced chaos with coherence. Each decision, each restraint, each act of focus compounds into momentum, creating a life that is resilient, magnetic, and aligned with the deepest truths of her own being. And action becomes inevitable, born not of desperation but of clarity. Where longing once paralyzed, clarity now accelerates. She moves boldly, decisively, unafraid of judgment, unshaken by rejection, undistracted by the trivial allure of attention. The world responds to this force because it recognizes authenticity, it senses sovereignty, it acknowledges the power of one who has transcended the addictive patterns that enslave so many. She does not chase, she does not plead, she does not compromise her essence. She acts from the center of her own authority, and in doing so attracts experiences, people, and opportunities that resonate with the frequency of her evolved self. Gratitude in this state is no longer optional, it is intrinsic. She recognizes the gifts embedded in struggle, the nights of longing that sharpened her discernment, the men who tempted her to surrender and taught her boundaries, the heartbreaks that expanded her capacity for self-love. Each moment of difficulty is reframed as a catalyst for growth, each disappointment as a doorway to insight, each encounter as a mirror reflecting the infinite complexity of her own soul. Gratitude amplifies her power, aligning her with forces greater than the fleeting allure of desire, embedding her in a flow that is steady, inexhaustible, and liberating. Adaptability and resilience become natural extensions of this state. Life continues to offer unpredictability, for the external world has no loyalty to inner mastery, but mastery is not swayed by circumstance. The woman who has faced the dark side of longing moves through volatility with equanimity, embracing change as a teacher, not a threat. She understands that attachment is not the same as commitment, that flexibility is not weakness, and that resilience is forged not in comfort, but in confrontation with the unpredictable. She does not merely endure, she thrives, shaping chaos into opportunity, uncertainty into exploration, and challenge into mastery. And finally, learning remains the eternal companion. There is no endpoint to understanding, no final summit to reach, no moment when the mind can rest in complacency. Every encounter, every pattern, every nuance of human interaction is a lesson, a chance to refine perception, sharpen judgment, and deepen wisdom. She reads history not as a record, but as a guide. She studies psychology not as theory, but as a tool. She observes the world not as spectacle, but as reflection. In this relentless pursuit of insight, desire is transformed from addiction into awareness, longing into discernment, and the past into the foundation of sovereign power. This is the culmination of the journey. The addictive patterns that once defined her now exist only as evidence of mastery. The longing that once threatened to drown her now serves as a compass. The shadow that once instilled fear now radiates wisdom. She moves forward unchained, unafraid, unrelenting, a living embodiment of the truth that power lies not in possession, not in conquest, not in seduction, but in awareness, sovereignty, and relentless self-mastery. She has learned the most dangerous, the most intoxicating, the most liberating truth of all, that desire is a tool, longing is a mirror, and the addictive force of attraction is not to be feared, but to be understood, and once understood, it cannot control her. She walks into the world fully awake, fully sovereign, fully alive, and in her presence, the universe bends not to her longing, but to her mastery. And so, in this mastery, she becomes untouchable, not because she is distant, cold, or indifferent, but because she has stepped beyond the illusions that once bound her. She no longer confuses attention for love, temptation for truth, or longing for fulfillment. The shadows that once whispered in her ear now echo only as teachers she has learned to heed and then release. Every step she takes is a declaration that she will not be swayed by charm, lured by deception, or seduced by the superficial. She moves through life with the quiet authority of someone who knows their own worth, someone whose presence alone commands respect, whose choices reflect clarity, whose power is unshakable. And in this presence, the world shifts. The addictive patterns dissolve. The chaos of desire transforms into the calm of discernment. The pull of fleeting infatuation is replaced by the gravity of purpose, the weight of self-possession, the magnetism of authenticity. She is no longer a prisoner of longing, she is the master of it. This is the ultimate freedom, not the absence of desire, but the command of it, not the escape from temptation, but the transmutation of it into wisdom, strength, and sovereignty. She has walked through the fire of addiction, through the darkness of craving, through the storms of emotional turbulence, and emerged luminous, anchored, and unstoppable. And as she moves forward, she carries this truth with her, unshakable and eternal, that the greatest power any woman or any human being can possess is mastery over the self, awareness of the shadow, and the courage to rise above what once controlled them. She walks not in fear, not in longing, not in compromise, but in triumph. The world may try to test her. Men may seek to lure her. Circumstances may attempt to bend her, but she will remain unbroken. For she knows the ultimate secret. No one can hold her, no one can define her, and no force in the universe can chain a soul that has discovered its own infinite sovereignty. And in that knowing, she is free. She is unstoppable. She is whole. She is awake